Okay, cool. Let's look at trauma and PTSD. Okay. So there's different types. There's mild trauma, like getting fired, breaking up with a partner, injury, negative social interaction. Acute, car accident, death of a loved one, traumatic brain injury, physical, social, mental, emotional abuse, especially in public. One-time sexual abuse, witnessing a crime, traumatic birth, terrorism, single event, terrorism, and then single medical trauma, natural disasters. Sometimes a broken heart can be this severe. And then there's chronic, recurring trauma, right? Ongoing abuse, terrorism, violent culture, ongoing medical traumas, parental neglect. I never thought of that as a trauma. And that actually, in the research, they say for kids, that's 80 or like 70% of the main type of trauma for kids was parental neglect. It's the number one type of trauma for kids, besides actual abuse. Abuse was way lower compared to neglect, right? Bullying, traumatic grief. Okay, and then very complex results from exposure to multiple severe traumatic events, right? Okay, the risk factors, symptoms. The main symptoms are reliving the event, making the trauma into an exciting story. This is a huge one. Avoidance. Avoidance, not only avoidance of proud people, but talking about it. And then actually, people really don't want to talk about their trauma often, and that can be a real problem. And the other really big problem is triggering the trauma so much that people can have seriously violent reactions. I mean, this is really serious. I know a center in Northern California, north of here, a few years ago. It was a place for PTSD, where people lived there, and they were in therapy, and this guy got really upset and shot and killed like 5 people, right? So this can be really intense. So there's a lot of very serious considerations when it comes to safety guidelines here. Okay. So negative emotions like fear, depression, self-image, less interest in activities, grief, self-harm, shame, acute distress, stress disorder, irritability, concentration, hyperarousal. It's huge, right? Easily triggered. Depression, suicidal thoughts, chronic pain, and substance abuse. That makes it really difficult and complex when you have substance abuse. And of course, there's all the drugs they do for it. And then there's different aspects of making sense of the trauma, learning skills to handle negative thoughts, reconnecting with people you care about, set goals and activities for the future. There's written narrative exposure. We go through it, write about it.
Under substance abuse, there also could be other addictions. It could the topic of, the title above that whole thing could be addictions itself.
Cool. Right.
Because there's other addictions except substance abuse.
Oh, perfect. Actually, there's even, I know for the first responders, sex is, like the guy I work with, he said that they watch a lot of porn even. And there's a full range of things people get addicted to. Good thinking. Okay. the current treatments, developed for written narrative interpersonal psychotherapy, talk about it, cognitive behavioral therapy, hyperbaric oxygen chamber, psychodynamic therapy, helping people interpret mental and emotional processes to gain insight on the behavior and patterns. Cognitive processing therapy to change your thoughts and feelings, prolonged exposure. You talk about it over and over, so it's no longer upsetting. That's a cool one. EMDR, people say that's 90% effective, right? Just moving the fingers back and forth, having your eyes following it. But you can do that with sound. You can actually, there's EMDR panning, where you listen to the sound moving back and forth from left to right in the headphones. So that can be very cool. Okay. Psychotherapy, alternative methods, a lot of different things here. Psilocybin's really big these days. Microdosing is huge. Right? Diagnose. Okay, EMDR. Okay, different things. Okay, types of people. This is a big difference as to why the people are treated. You know, we're doing, Ed Rupert is working on, do you want to say something, Carmen? No, you just unmute yourself. Okay. So we have, Ed's working with first responders. He's got contracts with 75% of the police and fire stations in Colorado. So if they have a crisis, they call Ed, and he takes out my sound table with my music and what he calls the black op ambulance, and puts them on the sound table. And a crisis means they're about to commit suicide. So they're about to commit suicide, and he saved 150 lives in the last year. Now he's got a whole team of therapists and doctors, but the first thing he does is put them on the sound lounge. Well, I asked Ed, I said, well, you ever have anybody freak out from it being too strong vibration? And Ed goes, these are first responders, man. They're like monsters, right? They're really strong. So you don't have to worry about that. But if you're working, you know, I actually also took our sound tables into a center of with 700 vets and their family. And we spent a whole day putting them on the sound table, and a lot of them were old and fragile, and it was too much for them because we didn't really vet it. We didn't really test it first for volume and stuff. So you've got to be really careful when you're working with the old and fragile versus somebody that's really strong, right? It's a completely different approach. And when they're on drugs, then we that's like a whole nother ballgame you're working with there, because now you're working with addiction. And then there's trauma for children, and then ongoing trauma, which is first responders. It's quite different than a past trauma. As Jackie saying, extremely effective EMDR app. Oh, okay. Let me copy that to the section down here and get to actual treatments. Okay. Okay. So, okay. EMDR app. I'll just put it here. Oh, let's didn't copy. Uh-oh. What happened? Oh, that's good. Okay, got it. This is the app that Jackie just put in the chat. Okay. Okay. Oh, I'm gonna put on my editing suggestions so I know what I'm fixing here. Okay, cool. Okay, so back to the current medication, current treatments. Okay, we've got types of people, and then conceptual framework. Okay, again, get them to a still point, right? I mean, overcome that chaotic, intense energy in their body. That's really huge for PTSD or trauma, because it's like this chaotic vibration that is so overcoming their body, overcoming their mind, overcoming their emotion, right? So with a sound table, there's nothing better but sound bowls, crystal bowls. If they're fragile, not so loud. If they're not fragile, go for it. A gong could be the deal. Intense, strong sounds to overcome any and definitely take over their body if they're strong, right? Breath is really good. Breathe to a song can be really good. That intake questions are really important because developing the connection where they trust you is way super important in dealing with trauma. Did you have something you want to say? No, I'll mute you again then. Okay. Afraid to talk, feel, or talk about it. That's the big thing. Gauge whether it's appropriate, because some people are just not going to talk about it. And that's why building trust with the intake question and getting them into the zone is so critical, because it's really often very difficult, and they can get angry if you ask too many questions about it that they don't want to answer, right? So there's a big process of connection before you start talking about it. Okay, so you look for sensations in the body. Where in the body is it manifesting? You can get them to start feeling it, right? Just like we did with the trauma. Do a little call and response. Let's see. Let's actually hold that question to the end, Amy. But let's go through the actual treatments here first. Okay, and then I'll ask it again. And okay, because there's so many different possibilities here. There's a full range, really. It's the answer. Okay, distraction, bad drugs, right? Afraid to, that shouldn't be in here. Right. Okay, practice call and response. Practice screaming. Although you have to be careful, because they say screaming often just brings it up and doesn't release it. So although screaming to sounds can be cool to get the energy moving, especially if they're shut down. Here's where they're actually shut down. So that could be very cool. I actually have one of our students who actually does exactly that, where she has different situations. Did you want to say something, Carmen? Keep on muting. Mute again. Okay. Okay. And then besides just getting them to feel and talk about it, then bringing it to the surface and healing. Now, this is even more touchy. This is so beautiful, Pamela. Aww. This is so beautiful to be able to actually come up with treatments when the system doesn't really have good treatments for this. Give them drugs, right? Okay, I'm inspired. Okay, bring to the surface and heal. Okay, make the sound of it, drawing them, having them draw with them, drawing with them. Ceremonies to release, catharsis, set it as a color or shape, scream with gongs, rattle shakers, create the sound catalog of music and emotions of your body. Make the sound where it is in the body and the remedy. Then there's the desensitizing aspect. We have a class where we go through 11 techniques for dealing with challenges and conflicts. And we start with letting it be. It's okay, let it be. Second is feel your body, be in your body, be present with it in your body, with the breath as well. Third is tone. Do toning in the midst of it, even silent toning. We also have even toning your home note, your soul note, which is very cool. And then we have the whole section of bringing sound to the trauma, to the challenge. And that is, can you welcome it? Welcoming the challenge after it's already here. Having gratitude for it. That's a tricky one. Compassion for it and for yourself. And then sending it love. And then going to a place where you're one with the universe, where it's all perfect, right? And so we do, you keep unmuting. I think your computer's unmuting you. So, so then the idea is to actually go through that technique. We have these really horrible sounds we play, really scathing frequencies. We practice each of the techniques with that. And by the end, people are like, oh my God, keep playing those sounds because I'm in bliss here, right? And so we would say, okay, well, what triggers you the most? Sound of bombs, gunshots. One guy said, babies crying, slamming doors. Okay, you now got it down. These techniques to be able to hold frequency. Now let's play the sound of the bombs. Play it low. We don't want to re-trigger it. And keep playing it until whatever technique works for you. Love, okay. Gratitude, compassion, just toning, right? And then we'll turn it up until you totally have it down. Okay. Seeing it from a higher perspective. Future self talking to current self. Difference between what happened to you and who you are. It's not who, give it office. So give it office hours. It's not who you are. Just check it out and find where home is. What's your vision in life? What would life be there if it were completely gone? Right? Create a different perspective. Rewrite your story. It's basic hypnotherapy, right? Imagine it hadn't happened and what it would be like. And then your mind would know the difference. Look for the positive from what you learned. How could you use your experience to help others? Right? And then a new timeline that's unwritten. We all have a choice, right? There's also the whole section on drug therapies. But doing sound with drugs therapies can be very cool. I mean, microdosing has huge potential. And then someone said switching emotion. So you go from one emotion and access different emotions with sound, and so that they get good at controlling their emotions from switching from one emotion. So they're not, the emotions aren't controlling them. They can actually switch emotions easily, and that becomes easy. Okay. And any other thoughts on the overall ideas, overall conceptual framework? These need to be, we would have got a lot of techniques in here.
I don't know if you addressed this or not, but the fracturedness of somebody where they could go into disassociate and different people, like kind of integrating all those fractured people, fractured self in that one person. Have you gone into that?
I'll put it down here. Integrating different fractured.
It can go under disassociates, multi-personality.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's cool. I know that could be a very unique. You know, it could actually have them make the sound of each of the different components of themselves, and then say, "Okay, we're going to have a concert and bring them all together." Right?
A friend of mine has the quantum scale biofeedback, and she worked with a woman who was put in a cage when she was young and had like 100 different personalities. She's actually helped her integrate it to about 7 instead of 100, and has all her artwork on the wall. It's pretty phenomenal.
Okay. Okay. For practitioner, for preparation, you got to be grounded, right? It's a serious work here. Clear the room, call in the guys, protective shields, work in conjunction. Okay, work in conjunction with the therapist, right? In the intake questions, you're going to ask whether they're already working with the therapist. And yeah, we're doing sound here, but we've got essential oils and plant medicine. We already mentioned plant medicine. Cool. Okay, working. Yeah, it's like it's really important in the intake question to see what was working, what's not with their therapist. right? The intake questions are really important, really critical here. Okay, so they must have knowledge of the variables of PTSD and current medications, which is basically what we're talking about here. Be honest with them as to your qualifications, right? They're not as therapists. That's kind of cool. Okay. Be fully present. Now, here's the really just watch like a hawk whether something is working or not. Yeah. Yeah. The so the yeah, it's just critical to really pay close attention, which is trickier when you're in a group, right? Okay, disclaimer. Okay, that's preparation. Okay, safety guidelines. Gauge the severity through intake questions. You know, I mean, you really want to. I think this is one question you want to try and get in there is, have you had any violent thoughts or episodes? Right. I mean, you know, slip it in there if you can. But you got to be careful because you don't want to trigger anything. But it's you really want through all these intake questions to actually gauge whether there's real danger here, right? Because you may be in above your head, right? So really, although even if you're not a psychotherapist, I think people commonly can actually bring in energy that's way better than a psychotherapist. So I don't want to scare you because some people are really good at working energy and working with people. So and so with sound. So you know, I don't. You know, some people say don't work in this area. I think you can definitely work in this area if you feel you've got something to offer. Any thoughts on that? Because that's a kind of a controversial area.
Yeah, I have a thought, David. I work with addicts a lot,
Uh-huh.
and that's true. You have to watch. People can get dangerous, or even to themselves,
Uh-huh.
even with addictions. And you have to watch where your level is. And I feel quite adequate. You know, I feel quite available to be able to do that. So I agree with you. You really have to watch where you're at, and if you think you're available to do that, do the work with them.
Is it possible that they really don't know that they have violent thoughts? They throw it out there. Yeah, they could certainly not know. All of this, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think the main thing is really pay close attention. So if something starts to escalate, you can, you know, stop and work it. Okay. Intake questions, small talk first, non-threatening questions. Again, number one critical aspect of these intake questions is connection, building a connection. Mm, yeah. Okay. So building connection. So you know, all types of questions here. Any therapies you've done? How often do you feel angry, or do you feel angry? Uh, can you speak and describe your condition with words? Yeah, you really have to gauge it because some of these questions could make them very uncomfortable, right? So you know, if you know, I mean, a really important question is, you know, are you able to talk about it up front? Are you able to talk about your trauma? And that will be really telling. Some people say, no way, I never talk about it. It's like, okay, we're going to do a little process here. Or, oh, yeah, I've been to many therapists, I've been talking about it, and I've been talking to God about it. It's like, you know, it's quite different the way you're going to approach it based on that feedback, right? Okay. Again, you guys can add more questions. If you know any psychotherapy questions, add, put them in here. Yeah, yeah, yeah. If you're disassociated, if you're shut down, you definitely can't talk. Okay. Lots of questions here we've got from over the years. Oh my God. Go on and on. Okay. Treatments. Okay. Again, getting them to a place of peace from the beginning, I think is you want to, it's good to start with that. I think, you know, just start. Don't even, you could even do this before you even start asking questions, right? Just say, hey, lay down, get on the sound table, or just lay down. I'm going to do a crystal bowl or toning or, voice session. I'm going to get you peaceful first, right? So that could be even good before the intake questions. Just get them to a place of peace. That's what we do so well. That's what we're all about. That right there can bring them to an epiphany, to a total transformation. So that's always, I think, even better to start with, and do it. You could do it later as well as a transformational tool, as we talked about. Yeah, peace is the key. It's really the key, number one. Okay, so same thing. When someone is shut down, how are you going to get them to talk? Okay. Well, you can guide them to be aware of their sensations, emotions, colors, the smells. Just bring them into the present moment. Carmi again. Okay. Carmi's got a wily computer there. Okay. So you can, do call and response, right? But ease them into it, right? Minimal talk therapy, as someone said. Let go. The goal is to let go of the story. You could do call and response. You could do gibberish, right? Okay, if they're, because after you do call and response, they might be open for it. Blah, 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 right? Just play, okay, and see if they go for it. Okay, where in the body is it manifesting? There's some really good questions here, or good thing. Actually, that should be in the questions, or add more to that. Okay, practice screaming sounds with gongs and stuff. Okay, express feelings and releasing, making the sound of how they feel. Drawing can be good. Okay, see it as a color or shape if they can't express it. Turn it into something like clouds. That one came up with that. They scream with. We got that one. Create a sound catalog of music and emotions of your life. Make the sound of where it is in the body. Fill the space with gratitude, love, or joy. Right. Tuning forks on the bottom of the feet or spine. Hoshi chimes, all the different instruments. Right. These are actually more peace than getting them to express themselves, and then move those later. Okay. So acupuncture points. That's not expressing either. Okay, these are all peace movement. Okay, movement could be good actually. Get them to do some movement. Right? Any other ideas as to how to get them to talk about what they're feeling about their issue? Get into a place of peace. Peace and trust is probably the number one thing. Yeah, breath. We have breath. We're doing the sound here, but breath is cool. We'll get breath later. Yeah. Okay. So reading and transformation. Okay. Now here's where we're starting to transform it. Start where they are and slowly shift the mood and perspective with the sound. Hold concert with them. Sound of your feeling with the intention of letting it go. Make the sound part of the body is holding it. Make the sound transform it into harmony. Use low sound so that accept the feelings. Low sound so that acceptation of all those feelings gets rooted in their bones. Find the rhythm that makes them safe to feel safe to digest. Find their rhythm. Use low sounds to get the whole session rooted. Vibroacoustic gong therapy. Let them play. I think having them play an instrument can be very cool. Have them play instruments. Begin to make mellow sounds using voice and zafir or koshi chimes. Okay, just an idea. Okay, and then tuning forks on acupuncture points. Root soul assessment. Find their note and get them That's kind of more music above, but getting them to a place of peace where you find their note and play a song for them on the sound table of their rhythm where they're at peace. There's a good one. I've got a tapping script where they can say, and then I've got frequencies for not for trauma, but for anxiety and different emotional issues. And you could just listen to the frequencies, and instead of tapping, you just read the tapping script while listening to the frequencies. Read script, tapping script while listening to frequencies. You find their key by playing each of the 12 notes. We teach it in our classes, and then see which one makes them the most peaceful and allows them to breathe. Okay. Then binaural beats, once you find their note, you can do binaural beats tuned to them. That would be above as well. That would be the peace section. And then the sonotherapy frequencies we just covered with it. Okay. Any other thoughts on how to transform it? I mean, ceremony, right? Just like the other ceremony could be really cool. Ceremony and ritual. Ceremony and ritual. Right? So getting at the first thing comes to mind is making the sound of the trauma and slowly transforming it. So, or just going to a peaceful place where you're honoring it.
And this is Mary. If we're just talking through processes of what might be an effective session for someone, I think helping build confidence in these techniques would be helpful. So like sharing maybe what the practitioner, the experiences they've had in the past and the outcomes that they've seen. So just to lay that groundwork that they have seen these techniques transform people, affect people, benefit people, just to kind of help set that
Excellent, excellent. And you put that down
perspective.
with preparation up there.
And the confidence, because people will relax more the more they feel they can trust the person that they're working with.
Right. No, that's excellent. Yeah. Meeting the quantum self ritual. That's interesting. Okay. Okay. So then there's the higher perspective. Okay. And that's where you can use cognitive therapy, spiritual perspective, future self talking to current self. Difference between what happened to you and who you are. You can use different sounds for that, right? This is what happened to you. Right? This is who you are. This is a little more detail of what we actually talked about earlier. Create a different experience. Imagine what it would be like if all the symptoms of your trauma were gone. That's one of my favorites right there. Imagine what it would feel like and make the sound of it. So you now get physically in their body what it would be like when it was gone. Or you can go back to before the trauma and feel like what it was in your body before that, right? It's all about getting consistent, coherent vibrations to be in the body, to be the norm, and diminish and overcome, make the time that you're spending in the traumatic vibration smaller. Okay. Okay, then we got voice analysis can be very good. We can find what frequencies are missing in their voice. That could help balance out their system. CDs and music, Water of Life, and Unconditional Love are the number one ones that have been really helpful for trauma. although I know one woman that said enlightenment saved her life. If somebody's really fragile, calm sleep, we should have a whole list of songs for people. But they, the homework is they can make up their own song, or they're not their own song, make up their own playlist. Like, what songs really help you, right, get above this or feel good, right, in the midst of it, right, and have them create their own little Spotify list, right, or just put it in iTunes. Okay, breath, you can do breath to a song, 25 to 30 minutes, then scream with the gong. One of our instructors does that, or one of our students. And prana, 3-part breath, and then explain about the lungs and how to breathe and give homework. Yeah. One of my favorite breath techniques is just, I went to a breath conference, and this one of the main guys, he says, just get it in. It doesn't matter how many times, how long you do it and how long you let it out. Just get it in. Breathe in really deep, whatever tempo is good for you, really deep, and then breathe out really and let it go completely. Just breathe in really. Who cares how long? So just get it in. That's the whole point. Get the air in. Right? And then when you do it to you can actually totally play an instrument to a breath and say, okay, breathe with this instrument. Okay, I'm doing this bowl. Breathe in. Now breathe out. Right? So, and you could even have them set the tempo of it if you like. Okay. Other modalities, oh my God, we got so many different things. The emotion code's really cool for dealing with this. Even using magnets on the body. Psychedelics, microdosing, plant medicine, oh my God. The potential, especially with sound, is so huge. Right? So also there's a book, no, this was on depression. Okay. There's different essential oils, right? And you can actually look up the frequency of the essential oils. There's charts online. You can octavize those frequencies down and then actually make a song in that key of the essential oil. That's really, you just cut it, the frequency in half. Ho'oponopono, prayer. There's all types of different things. Okay. And then close the space. Okay, for the future, we're building a sound vest, and we've got a vest actually, and we're building a virtual reality system where you can actually take a geometry, you can look down in virtual reality and see inside your body, and then you can take different images and put them in your body, and it will move it up and down on the sound table. So that could be cool. I think the desensitizing thing is the thing that excites me the most. The techniques I talked about. There's even, you could practice that with annoying sounds on YouTube. Say, okay, now you've got down how to run love. You've got down how to do compassion. Now, really, you got it down? Yes. Okay. Go to YouTube and find things that will trigger you. And do it on your, play it in low volume. Don't overdo it. Start low and just practice over and over and over until you can watch horrible things that you went through. One person said, go back to the place. Actually, one wasn't one person. It was a company, like the Veterans Administration. They were saying, actually, at a certain point, go back to where that trauma happened, because a lot of people avoid the place, right? Okay, homework with sound. Toning, 15 minutes each 3 times a week, much as you can. Go to a sound healing concert, right? Chant some mantras, learn a new instrument, play a drum, play a crystal ball, try it anyway. Chakra sound meditation. Chant, totally depends on what they're open to. Chart of bija mantras. Listen to music that helps you. Frequency sweep. Yeah. That's really good to open up the channel. Yeah. Okay. And breathing exercises. And then there's all these other things you can do. Routine goal, detail list, exercise is huge, and food. So let's get rid of your soul. That's your problem. Okay. Okay. Any thoughts or ideas on this? I know a guy who works with PTSD with the Veterans Administration with my sound line, and he actually has crystals where he puts electromagnetism into the crystals into their body in multiple places, and while they're on the sound table, and he's gotten, like, with that and the sound table, he's gotten 100% results of overcoming PTSD. Sound table is just so effective. What would you guys add? How would you do this differently for kids that are traumatized? What would you add? How would you do it differently?
I think with children, it's even more important to create a safe environment, unconditional acceptance in whatever they feel led on how to express themselves. And maybe they'd have fun with mimicking different things. So, mimicking sounds of nature, maybe mimicking what it would sound like for the wind to go through the trees. And so they sound like that. Or that the sound that you just made reminded me of a whale sound. So, like, maybe mimicking what it would sound like to be a whale. And then so to do that scale of tones. That might be an effective way to communicate with them or connect
that's
with
great.
them.
Play with sounds. Just play with sound. Okay, do this. Okay, actually, in my program with the kids, I actually go through all the different sounds and call and response. And at one point, I go, okay, make this sound. Ah! And everybody kind of laughs and does it. So now they start to get used to making sound. And then you just get them really comfortable with that. Then you say, okay, remember when that happened? What sound would that be?
Mm.
And if they don't come up with it, you could come up with it, right? You go, well, I would think it would be kind of like this. What do you think? I think it would be like, ah! And they go, no, it's more like this. Oh. Then you're really making headway.
Yeah. And whatever the response is fine, and it's accepted and encouraged. And yeah.
Any other thoughts on kids? Okay. How about an even trickier question? How would you work differently with sexual abuse?
Definitely first is creating a safe space or a safe environment, David.
Mm-hmm. I've never thought about it. I guess we just do the same things.
Yeah, and I don't know, like in contrast, I don't know at all, but maybe it wouldn't be leading or conjuring them to create it wouldn't really need to be for them to just take the lead somehow, I would think, for them to just regain their power.
Yeah, if you just do even, it's really interesting. Okay, my first thought, not knowing what I'm doing, is I would think to not go, don't ask them about the details of what happened. Don't,
Right.
have them relive it, right? But just actually go and say, okay, what kind of feeling has it left you with? And then where do we want to go? And then, okay, I'm going to do a little concert that kind of starts with where you are now and where we want to go. How's that feel for you? There's one thing that's always good when doing anything is say, I don't know, what do you think?
Mm-hmm.
That's like in any negotiation,
Right.
in anything, I don't know, what do you think? So it empowers them to have a choice on what's going to happen.
Right, because I wasn't sure if the nexus point would be before the trauma happened. Like, do you remember back
Uh-huh.
to that time and
Oh,
build
okay,
from
cool.
there? But yeah,
Uh,
I don't know.
Wow. Yeah, this is uncharted. I don't have a clue because you could talk about, do you feel guilty about it? But boy, I'd have to do a lot of thinking before I really dove into this realm because I've never even thought about it. I've never thought about how you would deal with sexual abuse at all. I
Right,
don't
but
have a
I do
clue.
think it's a really critical topic
Mm-hmm.
and something to be prepared for to
Right,
help with
right.
therapy and help people overcome.
Beautiful. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I think, just with everything, just go as far as you feel comfortable or as far as they feel comfortable and
Hmm.
watch like a hawk, how far. So maybe, I know people that I've talked to who say, oh yeah, I was totally sexually abused. I'll tell you all about it. It was horrible. And I've really done some work about it. And they're ready to talk about it. These days, people often don't talk about anything. And so it's like, so it can be, if you dive in, you might find, oh, there's a complete opening here. And as opposed to a closing that you need to work with.
Right, and this might be an area where those treatments are better to do first, like all the sounds and the different
Yeah.
just before you start actually asking questions. So
Yeah.
just,
Yeah. You can always default to just doing sounds. To have somebody come in and they tell you about as much as they want to tell you, and then you do sounds, and because they're there for that reason, you're basically looking at transforming the energy to coherence. And so you can always, if you don't know what to do, you can always default to just peace.
I think it's really important to, well, besides gaining the confidence and trust in the conversation, is helping them get back into their body and honoring the sacredness of what they are.
Good.
It's like,
Oh, good. Well, this is
remember,
one thing
sacred
to be.
being beyond the trauma.
I'm sorry. Yeah, the one thing that just occurred to me, you may not want to be putting tuning forks on the body, or putting things on the body if it's serious sexual abuse, right? So there's definitely some considerations about playing sounds on the body.
David, I could offer something here.
Okay.
I'm not a somatic experiencing practitioner, but I have had some training, and the idea of titration and pendulation, which are themes in somatic experiencing, I think are valuable here. One, titration, just going slowly, just
What's the word?
Titration.
How do you spell that?
Titration, I think.
Oh my God. A word I've never heard.
You've probably heard it in science, like, I don't know, dropping something in a petri dish sort of.
So what does it mean?
I think of it as just sort of going slowly. So you
Okay.
step like to take just a foot in. So you don't just go in and say, okay, tell me about the experience.
Uh-huh.
You know, you just kind of slowly
Right.
go in and slowly come back out. Well, that's also pendulation, which is going in and coming back out.
What's that word?
Pendulation.
I've never heard that one either.
In other contexts, I bet you have. Pendulation. Maybe somebody will write it in the chat. But so one, just like thought about that is like you can start somebody with their, you know, a moment of something that feels, get them to visualize something that feels really great that day. You know, I don't know, for them might be a walk on the beach or their animals or something like that. And we could have them create a sound for that so that you have that as an anchor to go back to. So then when you kind of start to step, you know, titrate and step into the harder experience, you can bring them back out. If they start to kind of spiral, which is what we don't want to happen, you can bring them back out and bring them back to that place of their own safety and their own peace.
This is so excellent.
Makes sense.
Really excellent. It's very cool.
Okay.
That would be really cool to spend a lot of time creating that anchor. You know, okay, where are you at peace? Where are you at home? Who are you when you are you, right? And really go into it a lot and develop like a whole litany of ideas of who they are. Let them, you know, choose, right? And then say, okay, here's the sound of, how about this sound for who you are? And play, no, okay, not that one. Okay, let's play this one. Okay, then that's where you are at peace and confident and in you are you, right? And then build that in a really detailed way with sound and like almost like a vision board, right?
Sounds great.
Oh, this is really good. This is excellent. Oh, you could do, that's interesting. Evelyn said boundaries, a thing on boundaries, right? You could do, I mean, we have some exercises for the kids on boundaries, you know, to actually, okay, we actually have them take a 6-foot pole and draw a circle around them of 6 foot. And then we have people come into their space, into that 6-foot circle and say, okay, how does it feel? Okay, what would you do with sound to actually set that boundary? Okay, when are you going to let people in, right? And play with this boundary, right? That could be very beautiful and subtle, as long as you do it in a very considerate way. Too. Okay. Well, any thoughts or comments overall? How about you, Sylvina? You work with people in the hospital. Tell us about your experience of working with people with serious illnesses and trauma.
Hi.
Hey there.
So I wanted to add something about children, and then maybe I can talk about
Okay.
patients. I was working with a 9-year-old girl that she lost her father, and they didn't know what the mother was. So she was raised by the grandmother. So she was going through grief and eating disorders. So in different sessions, I was asking her, what was the music that she likes to listen to it, so I can get into her world, right? First.
Cool.
So we were listening to her music, whatever band or rap, whatever she was like to listen, and connecting, getting familiar. And then, so we had a rapport.
Mhm.
We connected because I can get into her world, right? So then I was asking her to draw, you know. So
Mhm.
she draw her father somewhere, mother somewhere, and it was interesting because I have all the drawings and the process. And then almost at the end of the session, we went into a sound healing, sound therapy, and I was asking her, okay, let's go into a garden, kind of a hypnotherapy with sound. And at the end of the session, she was so happy. She said, I talked to my dad. Oh, really? I said. And what did he say? Well, he loved me so much.
Oh,
Wonderful. And she was so happy that she was able to probably create in her mind or whatever independent what system we are, and if she really was connecting to the soul. And but besides that, it was an incredible healing for her. And so she was looking forward to come to the session because she said, I want to go into that garden. I really want to go into that garden because she was feeling so good, right? So
I love it. I love it.
yeah, I was not trying to impose any sound. I was just trying to, sing. And then little by little, we were singing together her songs as well. Even it was rap, right?
Uh-huh.
So I trying to learn. I'm trying to get into her world, not into, So, and then working with cancer patients at San Francisco General, what I was usually doing was basically playing lullabies, neutral sounds, so I don't trigger anybody with somebody that don't resonate with mantras or Hindu or Om.
Uh-huh.
So the last thing that I want to do in a hospital is sing Om, usually, because in my experience, I worked there for 16 years, and definitely I wanted to be absolutely neutral. But when I was working with Asian patients, I didn't speak Chinese or the Korean language, the dialect. I asked them how to say love in their language. So, and then I think it was oh we. So we all were singing oh we. So the idea is to go into their world and not to bring what I think is best, right? So that's what I can share. So
Thank you. That's beautiful. Just excellent.
thank you.
Who else has some stories of working with people? Anybody? Yeah. Come back in a year and you guys are gonna go, oh my God, right? Okay, so Roxanne?
I recall a young girl that I was working with who actually had a trauma due to a farm accident. She was running toward her father, who was on a tractor haying the fields. And she ran right into the blades that were propelling the cutting of the grasses. And so both of her legs were amputated.
Ooh.
My father ran to her, picked her up, picked up her legs. They went into the emergency room. I got them when they were on the pediatric unit. And it was the day after her surgery where she discovered she had no legs left. And so the head nurse said, I want you to go in and help her out, adjust to this trauma. And I know, and I agree with, what Sylvia just said, which is, you really want to try to get into that person's world and not impose anything on that
Mm-hmm.
individual, especially a youngster. So it seemed she was more interested in listening to music and having that be the bridge for our conversation. And so I had a playlist and basically began to help her to affirm the working parts of the body. I know that you're having pain right now in a leg that's not there, but what are you also noticing about the rest of your body that is working? What is working? Let's look at what is working and sing a song to that. So that's another, taking a higher perspective and incorporating, adjusting to the new normal.
Beautiful. It's just sacred work, just sacred work. Ed in Colorado, who works with the first responders,
Yeah.
oh my God, the stories he has, they're not repeatable. I mean, they're so horrific. And these guys are going through this weekly. Every week, something major. I mean, just unrepeatable stuff. Right? And and there's really no support for the first responders. I mean, Ed's system in Colorado is the only system in all of the United States. He's gone to conferences. There is no other system where they have treatment, because first responders are not going to go to the hospital or call a therapist, right? You can't have that stigma, right?
Right.
So it's really, it's like they're completely not taken care of in this country. And it's huge. I mean, we could so help them. But this is the other thing Ed said, is they don't trust anybody for therapies. And only because Ed was in the military and was a first responder himself, do they trust Ed, right? So it's really tricky because, I mean, it's like if you go in and you say, oh, I do sound healing, we're going to take care of this. It's like, give me a break, right? It's really hard to be accepted by them, really hard, right? Especially in the job they're in, because they don't trust anybody in their job, right? So but it still doesn't mean there's huge potential to help them dramatically, right? Dramatically.
David, do you know what, even just a shift in languaging, what seems to work there is when you use sports performance languaging like peak performance, or these various consultants that work with peak performers, there's a slight bump in that, and it makes it seem the same things you would do to an athlete, an elite athlete, like neurolinguistic programming or something. It just becomes the next jump is why would I not go to a peak performance? The guy who does
Cool.
It's the languaging.
That it puts it more in physical language, the euphemism, than in esoteric or spiritual language. Yeah,
right.
That's a great point. To connect with the person that you're working with.
Yeah, and athletes, for some reason, with athletes, the word athlete or peak performance seems to work nicely for people that, first, let's say.
Very cool.
Right.
Excellent.
The other psychological lever that we can use if you're doing sound healing as a sound healer is to understand that when you bring in the veteran who's been through and through something that you want to teach, it's a very powerful tool. And that person who is the veteran is now the teacher of the sound healing or of the peak performance or the athletic technique that you want to embed into the sound healing, and rename it, as you said, rename it, but have the voice be the voice of the person who's a veteran, who had success, and who's trustable, believable, and confident in reaching the population you want to reach. This goes across the board, whether it's a cancer group or whether it's the first responders, any population. If you take the veteran who's been through it and believes this is useful and beneficial, that voice is very powerful to partner with you to teach it.
Great. Excellent. Perfect. Perfect. I think that's the deal. Okay, Silvina?
Oh, yes. I wanted to add something about trauma that Dr. Gabor Mate, he mentioned that there is trauma if you're wounded. Some people go through some abuses, but they are not wounded. And some people are very wounded. So it's been interesting, the clarification that he made about trauma. And then when we were talking about grief, I'm sorry, I'd like to add something that, and we were talking about if that is okay, that some of the stages of grief, of course, we talk about anger, but definitely under anger, there is so much pain to work through, right? So usually it's anger. Usually when we see somebody very angry, there's so much pain and frustration. So, and there was this singer from Argentina who lost his wife and his daughter. So he went to talk with Mother Teresa, and Mother Teresa said, you know what happened right now, that you have all this love, so much love, and what are you going to do with this love now that they left? So you need to start giving that love back to, organizations but anyway, I wanted to add that. So thank you.
Thank you. I love it.
Yeah, and this is Mary. I had a comment going back to what it was Rox was saying about just working with veterans and music and sound, and just maybe to reconnect with, I mean, that's how they all got through their basic training, was with a lot of chants, the running chants that they do. So they know that sound and music can be effective to accomplish goals like the "Oh Lord, I want to go away from Quantico." Like, so they're used to that, getting through for their training, right? So they maybe aren't as disparate from sound as what we might think they would be, because they've gone through their training, like sound has been a part of their training in music. And
Cool. Yeah, no, I think that's really an important point. It's like, because, especially if they're coming in cold, they're not coming to you. It's like they're often going to have like preconceptions about what's going on. So to really frame it, I like to frame it as, start with, well, you know how music makes you feel? We've just taken it to a whole different level of how it works inside the body, mind, and emotions. Right? That's what I like to start with. Good. Anybody else? Wow. Okay. Well, I think we made some really good headway, excellent ideas. And I think once we get this really refined, it's going to really catch on like wildfire, because, there's so many sound healers out there that are doing treatments on people that they're just winging it. And often their spirit makes it work really well. You bring in the right energy and it works. But to inform the treatments like this is huge. It's just so much, make things so much safer, and will really help bring this into the mainstream. I mean, I think this is just the beginning of a major, transformation of the field to make it more accepted, especially for hospitals. Right? Especially. I mean, I've learned so much myself. I mean, it's like I'm ready to go. It's like ready to, do even more and share it with all the students. Thank you all for your contribution. Again, I'm going to be posting these Google Docs, and you're welcome to go in and look through it and edit it. I'll have suggesting turned on so we can see your edits and approve them or not or whatever. And especially if you have any intake questions from any therapies that you know of, we could, that are more accepted, other than what we've come up with. What we've got some pretty cool ones, right? Then you can get those in. So I'll send you the link to be able to edit this within the week here. Again, thank you so much for joining in. Any last final thoughts or anything? All right, let's do one sound. Send love to all those that are struggling with grief and trauma and PTSD with a nice long sound. Mini vowel. Go ahead and unmute. Thank you so much. Let's have a wonderful rest of the weekend. Take
Right.
care.
Namaste.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you.
Bye.
Mhm.